Today on Alex Autos, we're out here taking a look at the all-new Cadillac ELR. This is Cadillac's greenest two-door coupe in their family. This also competes with the likes of the Cadillac ATS Coupe and the Cadillac CTS Coupe in Cadillac's lineup. Now before we go too much further, let's talk about the Cadillac ELR's sales figures, because the ELR has been receiving a bit of mixed press lately. Cadillac has been selling about 100 of these a month for the last few months or so. That is a little bit lower than Cadillac's projections. However, that sales number doesn't necessarily surprise me, because this vehicle is a two-door coupe, and two-door coupes generally sell a little bit slower than four-door sedans. This is also a fairly expensive vehicle, coming in at $75,000 starting. It'll get up to about $80,000 if you add it all the way up. So we already have two things that are affecting its sales. It's expensive, it's also a two-door vehicle. Now, when you add to that the fact that this is a serial hybrid, a parallel hybrid, and a plug-in EV all at the same time, you can sort of see why it's selling around 100 a month. Up front, we have all the design themes you'd expect out of a modern Cadillac. We have a large Cadillac logo, and we have this bold grille that extends all the way onto the hood right over here. On either side, we have these large headlamp modules. These incorporate standard LED low beams and LED high beams, LED daytime running lamps, and LED turn signals. The strip that you see running right across here is both the daytime running lamp module and the turn signal. It will turn amber when the turn signal is engaged. This entire module actually sweeps back almost to the middle of this front wheel well, and it has a little bit of a rise on either side of the vehicle, giving it sort of a remembrance of the Cadillac fins from yesteryear. I think the ELR is most attractive in this side profile. It has this very futuristic, very concept car looking raked profile towards the front. We also have these large 20-inch wheels that are actually quite wide for a hybrid or an EV or any kind of plug-in. These are 245 with tires, and these are not low rolling resistance tires, as some people have said earlier. You'll also notice we have an aerodynamic treatment right here for the door handle. You just reach your hand in there, and that's where you'll find the electric release for the front door. This is a little bit different than you'll find on the Tesla with the disappearing door handles. Now continuing forward, you'll notice that this vehicle is plugged in, and so we have this little green light right here on the side view mirrors that helps you know from a distance that the car is actually charging. You'll find the charge port right over here, and you'll find the gas door on the other side of the vehicle. In terms of length, the ELR slots in right in the middle of the Cadillac family. The ATS Coupe is 183 inches long, this is 186 inches long, and the CTS Coupe is 188 inches long. From the rear view on the ELR, you can really see these strong shoulders that build right up here up front and continue through the back of the ELR. That's because the ELR is a four-seater. We don't have a center seat right there in the back, and that allows them to make this rear section pinch in a little bit towards the rear. It gives us this very attractive look. We have this incredibly stubby trunk right back here as well. The trunk is really only about 6 inches long on the top. We have these tail lamps that run right here from the side of the vehicle all the way down, sort of echoing the fin theme that Cadillacs used to have. Now, there are very few vehicles with which the ELR logically competes, and as such, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to exterior styling. I really like the look of the ELR. I have to admit that the Tesla is very attractive, but I think the BMW i8 is the tops in this segment. This is a really small segment. Again, we only have the BMW i3, the i8, and sort of the Tesla. This is really not the same sort of thing as the Tesla Model S, but a lot of you on my Facebook page said that they felt that this logically competed with the Tesla, and that's why I'm including it in this category. You'll notice I haven't included any other EVs because this is very different, and only the i8 and the i3 currently have a range extending mode. Now, because the ELR is a serial hybrid, a parallel hybrid, or an EV, depending on the mode that you select, things are a little bit more complicated under this hood than your average vehicle, so this explanation will take a little bit of extra time. Right over here, we have a 1.4-liter four-cylinder engine. This produces 84 horsepower all by itself. Now, this engine is mated to an automatic transaxle of sorts. It's not a true transmission, it's a single planetary gear set with 2 electric motors. Now, in terms of general theme, this is more similar to what you'll find under the hood of a plug-in Prius or a Ford Energy product than any of those other vehicles out there on the market. So this is very different under the hood than something like a BMW i3 or i8. Now, this is also very different than something like a Honda Accord or those other hybrid products out there like you'll find from Mercedes, BMW, etc., that use a pancake motor sandwiched between a traditional automatic transmission and a gasoline engine. Now, according to Cadillac's documentation, when you're in EV mode only, the maximum horsepower output is 157 to 181 horsepower. In my testing, however, I saw a maximum of 177 horsepower based on the display in the instrument cluster. When you switch the ELR into true hybrid operation, that can be done by either depleting the EV portion of the battery completely or by switching the vehicle to the hold mode, then system horsepower rises to 217 horsepower total. Now, the motors and the engine under the hood right here are backed up by a 16.5 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. It runs the length of the vehicle and then across the rear wheels of the vehicle as well. Now, of that battery pack, 11.6 kilowatt hours are actually usable. The reason that General Motors does that is because it extends the life of the battery pack. If you completely charge and discharge any battery pack, its lifetime will be reduced. So versus a pure EV, something along the lines of a Tesla or a Nissan Leaf or something along those lines, this battery pack should last a little bit longer because GM is only using the middle slice of the battery's actual capacity. Now, in addition, this battery pack is also liquid cooled, so we have a coolant loop that is dedicated specifically to the battery, and that battery pack has that fluid running around in it when it's charging or when the vehicle is operating. Now, of course, because there's so many different operational modes on the ELR, fuel economy is a little bit tricky to nail down. If your battery is fully charged, you can drive up to 37 miles according to the EPA. Now, your range will vary depending on the terrain, how hot or cold it is outside, and how you drive the vehicle. Now, once that battery is completely depleted, you'll average, according to the EPA, again, 33 miles per gallon on the gasoline drivetrain. Now, versus the other hybrids out on the market, you'll notice that this drivetrain will behave a little bit differently when you're running on gasoline only, because this engine produces 84 horsepower, which is notably less than something like the Toyota or the Ford larger hybrids that are this same size vehicle. Now, that means that when you're stopped at a stoplight or when you're climbing a hill, you may notice that the engine will rev much higher than it would in a Ford or a Toyota hybrid because it's attempting to generate and bank electricity back into the battery for when you need it later. Now, in terms of electric-only efficiency, this slots in at 82 mpge. I don't really agree with the whole mpge philosophy from the EPA, but it is one method of comparing this to other EVs or plug-in hybrids out there on the market. At 82 mpge, this is less efficient than you'll find in most of the pure EVs out on the market, like that recent Soul EV that I just reviewed on this channel. Now, the big thing to know about the ELR when buying one and calculating costs compared to especially those pure EVs out there on the market, something like a Tesla or an i3 or i8, this vehicle has a much smaller battery, so its charging requirements are much lower, and many people, I suspect, could get away with just this 110 volt cord. Because if you plug your vehicle in with the 110 volt cord and you're charging at 12 amps, this car will only take about 8 hours at night to charge. For most people, even if you get home late at night, you'll have 8 hours of sleep or so. You'll be able to get up in the morning and have a completely charged ELR. Now, what that really means to you is that in a vehicle like this, you don't necessarily have to invest in a 240 volt charging station, because that will only cut your charging time in half to about 5 hours. This 240 volt charger in this vehicle isn't terribly quick because it doesn't need to be. The battery isn't that big, so it doesn't take that long to charge at 110 volts. It makes it an awful lot more convenient, and it means your out-the-door price on the car to have a fully functioning car is going to be lower. You won't need to call an electrician out to your garage. You won't need to have that charging station installed. And if you get a Tesla with the high-speed charger, you may even need to do some significant rewiring of older homes especially in order to support those fast chargers. Front seat comfort comes in at 9 out of 10 points. These are more comfortable than the front seats in the Model S that I last sat in. These are 20-way adjustable seats by default in the ELR. We have a 4-way adjustable lumbar support, we have adjustable side bolsters, and then we also have a 4-way adjustable headrest. In addition, we have a manually extending thigh cushion right under there, and we have a tilt telescopic memory-linked steering wheel. Unlike budget luxury vehicles, you will find a front passenger seat that has the same range of motion as this driver's seat. Now let's see how easy it is to get in the back. Although getting into the back seat is fairly easy, getting comfortable for a 6-foot passenger is certainly not. I do have to cock my head to one side like this or slouch a great deal in order to sit with my head not touching this rear glass. My head's actually above the rear windshield, not really above the roof in the ELR. That's kind of a pity because things are furnished very nicely back here. We have the Alcantara headliner that continues all the way back to these rear pillars, as well as the B pillars in the vehicle. They're both Alcantara lined. And then right back here we have stitched pleather and stitched Alcantara on the sides, and stitched leather running right down here along the center of the vehicle with really nice French seams. We also have two very large and very accessible cup holders. Now, if you do have rear passengers that are smaller in stature, they may find these rear seats very comfortable, but someone about my height, you just won't be able to fit them back here for too long. The ELR is a coupe, not a liftback, and the difference is that this glass right here above my head does not lift up when you open the trunk lid, so it has a real trunk right back there that we'll take a look at in a bit. To improve cargo practicality, however, we do have folding rear seat backs. These are 50-50 folding rear seat backs, or I guess you could call them 40-40 folding rear seat backs, because this center section does not fold. So if I fold this other section open right here, you'll see that this middle portion right here always stays fixed. Now, as I said earlier when I was in the back seat, the attention to detail on the interior of this vehicle extends to the rear cabin area as well. The final pillars there on the vehicle also are covered in Alcantara, and you can see down below that pillar right there that we also have the same sort of stitched pleather going on and the same sort of attention to detail in the leather stitching as you'll find up front. Now moving up to the front seats, you can see we have fixed position shoulder belts right there for both the driver and the front passenger. We have these four-way adjustable headrests. They do move in and out like that with this knob on the side of the headrest, and then they're powered for the up and down motion. The driver's seat is memory linked. Now as we transition from the light here into the shadows, you can really see the attention to detail on the dashboard and on the doors in the ELR. We have real wood trim right there, we have stitched pleather, stitched Alcantara, as well as real carbon fiber right there blending with the doors and the dashboard. You can see it has a very nice depth to it, whether we're in the shadows or in the light. Moving out to the rest of the door panel, everything you see is a soft touch plastic. We also have leather wrapped armrest right over here, and then we have this push button to open the doors rather than a traditional door handle. That lack of a traditional door handle actually helps improve the aerodynamics, and that's why they do it. Now, in the event of an emergency, if you needed to open those doors from the inside, there is a little lever right over here, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side, to release those doors mechanically. But we also have one for the driver's side right back here in the trunk. It's this little lever right there. If we pull on that, it actually opens the front driver door. Moving on over to the dashboard, I have again positioned this so it is in strong sunlight so you can really see that real wood grain trim right there. We have real carbon fiber below it. We also have Alcantara above that, and then stitched pleather going on up here. Some people found this a little bit too busy, but I really like the different styles that are going on in this cabin. One nice touch is that this small pillar right up here is also coated in Alcantara, which a lot of manufacturers don't do. Opening the glove box, we really find more of a glove slot. There are three different slots. This one up here in the upper left is just barely deep enough to accommodate the owner's manual in that position. We have a small one next to it and then a larger one below. I was barely able to fit an iPad in that one below. Moving on over to the center of the dashboard, we have our start-stop button right here because we do have keyless go and keyless entry in the ELR. Two large air vents with open and close knobs right there. You'll find touch buttons for the hazard lights, lane departure warning system, the glove box, and the parking sensors right over there. This is a large 8-inch color touchscreen. It's essentially the same CUE software that you see in the Cadillac XTS, CTS, ATS, etc. Now in this video, because I have a polarizer on this lens, it's going to look a little bit funny to you right here, but this display is extraordinarily bright. It's also extraordinarily crisp. It also is one of the few displays that uses a glass cover to it rather than a plastic cover, so it makes the touchscreen act more like an iPad or a smartphone that you're probably used to. Now, if you want to know more about the Cadillac CUE system, then go ahead and click that link at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to that CUE system in a different review. Really, the only difference between that and this vehicle is this energy option right here. You'll see a very similar screen to what you'll find in the Chevy Volt. We have information on how much energy has been used. You can see this particular charge. I've driven 32 miles, gas 34 miles on battery, used 9 kilowatts, 1.2 gallons of gasoline, got 60.2 miles per gallon overall. The lifetime in this vehicle, 41.2 miles per gallon. Now if we click on over to the charging screen, this is where you'll find the ability to change between 8 and 12 amps, and that only affects the 120 volt cord. We can also change whether we want to charge on a timed schedule based on your charge rates, that would be the rate of your electricity, or whether you want to charge immediately. Immediately is the default right there. We also get the typical flow map right here so you can see where the power is going and how charged your battery is. Now below that 8-inch touchscreen, you'll find the controls for the climate control as well as for the Cadillac CUE system itself. We have a power button, home button, volume slider right there, and then we have buttons for our heated seats and the climate control system right there in the middle. Now if we touch this little portion right there below that, this screen will lift up and it gives us access to a sort of a secret storage cubby right there that has one additional USB port right at the back. Continuing our move down the center console, we have our traditional shifter right over here. We also have a traction control disable button and a drive mode selector button. We'll talk more about that in the drive section. Over here we have two large cup holders that are easily revealed by this motorized cup holder lid. It opens and closes all on its own. Now these cup holders were easily able to accommodate the largest takeout sodas I was able to throw at it. Behind the cup holders we have a small storage cubby with a 12 volt power outlet right there. Now behind that we have a nicely padded center armrest. It opens towards the driver only. It opens to reveal a somewhat shallow storage cubby for a front-wheel drive vehicle. That's because the battery pack is right here under this section of the center console. We have two USB ports, an auxiliary input, so you can see there's still a decent amount of room to store wallets or other knickknacks right there in the center console. Cadillac chose not to adopt their large LCD instrument cluster for use in this particular vehicle, instead opting for a unique, smaller display that has very different readouts and very different layouts to the other Cadillacs out there. Right over here on this side we have a battery gauge that has these little LEDs that tick up towards full. On this side we have a fuel gauge that does the same sort of thing in blue over here on the right. Now this LCD instrument cluster is controlled by this four-way joystick-like button right over here on the right side of the steering wheel. It clicks up to down, side to side, and it clicks down to select. Now taking a closer look at this instrument cluster, there are basically 4 different layouts that you can choose from. You choose from them in this menu that is relatively similar to their Cadillac products. You can choose this classic view that we're taking a look at right here, and this gives you just a central speedometer in sort of an analog format. This is all an LCD, but this dial that you see right here and these little blue detents, those are actually physical dials that are grafted sort of onto the LCD. So it floats in front of the LCD, giving it sort of a physical frame that makes it look a little bit more attractive than some of those flat displays out there. We also have a modern look that gives you a blue or green halo depending on how you're driving the car. Then we get Classic Enhanced, which gives you some extra gauges on the side. We get the acceleration and braking score over here on the left. And then over here on the right, we get just a battery score. If we were in a hybrid mode, which did not involve the EV battery because it was depleted or because we were in the hold mode, we would also get an engine readout right over there on the right side as well. And you'll notice on the bottom, we have an EV range, we have a fuel range right over there on the right. Up here, we have our transmission mode indicator, and then we have our odometer right over there on the top. And the last mode is basically the same sort of thing with the modern theme applied to it. So you can see we have the engine right over here, battery over there, and then we don't have any braking score indication right there on that display. Now zooming out to the steering wheel, we have a 3-spoke steering wheel that is very similar to what you'll find in the rest of the Cadillacs out there. However, unlike some of those other Cadillacs, we actually have the continuation of this Alcantara design theme and the stitched leather right here on the airbag cover, which really dresses things up quite a bit. Over here on this side, we again have that 4-way joystick that controls that multi-information LCD right there, dedicated track up and down buttons, volume up and down buttons right there as well. On this side of the steering wheel, we have the same sort of joystick going on for the cruise control right there, up and down, side to side as well, voice command button, phone hang up button, dedicated button for our heated steering wheel right there, and a collision warning adjustment button right there that allows you to change the warning from near to far on the collision warning system. Now you won't find as much cargo room right here in the back of the ELR as you'll find in something like an ATS or a CTS Coupe. That's because the batteries have to go somewhere. Now here I have a 24-inch roller bag, and we can insert it in the cargo area in this fashion because this trunk lid is quite tall. You can see how tall it is, but it's also quite narrow. So it's really more of a cargo slot than a traditional trunk. Now I was able to fit 3 24-inch roller bags on that side of the trunk, but I wasn't able to fit a 4th right over here on this side, and that's because there is an amplifier module right under the glass right here that does prevent you from adding that 4th bag in that position, but I can insert it in that position. Right over here I have a 26-inch roller bag, so as you can see this is a very practical trunk size. Now under the cargo area floor in the ELR, we have 2 little hatches right here. The first one has a little hook to help hold it open. That's where you'll find the 120-volt power adapter that comes with the car. It goes in a little compartment right in there, along with a few other small items. In this center compartment, this is where you will find the tire inflator. This has a can of Fix-A-Flat basically integrated with it as well. Overall, getting in and out of the trunk is a little bit more tricky because of this trunk slot. However, there is enough room in here to actually close the trunk lid. We do have a trunk assist handle right here, which does make it easier to close the trunk lid than pawing on the paint on the outside or the fabric on the inside. Overall, I'll give this 6 out of 10 points in my exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. Now before we go out on the road, let's talk about the various hybrid system modes in the ELR. We have Tour, we have Sport, we have Mountain, and we have Hold. Now the drive mode selector controls the way the electronic damping in this vehicle works, the way the throttle is mapped, and most importantly, the way the hybrid system behaves. Tour is the mode that's always engaged by default, so whenever you turn on the vehicle, Tour mode is going to be engaged. That gives you the softest suspension setting as well as the least aggressive throttle mapping. In addition to that, Tour mode will automatically engage EV mode in the ELR as long as there is charge in the EV battery. That limits your horsepower to what we talked about earlier. Now once the EV portion of this battery is depleted, the vehicle will choose between serial and parallel hybrid operation depending on what it thinks is best at the moment. Now Sport mode might be a little bit confusing because unless the EV battery is depleted, it will not give you the fastest 0 to 60 time. That would actually be the Hold mode. Sport mode gives you the firmest damper settings on this vehicle. It also gives you the most aggressive throttle mapping, but it will still stay in EV mode operation even when the vehicle is floored. Next we get Mountain mode, and Mountain mode is very different from the other modes and very different from other hybrids out there on the market because when you switch this vehicle to Mountain mode, it will actually attempt to charge the battery with the engine under the hood. And I'm not talking about just a little bit of charge, I'm talking about it'll actually climb up bars and give you certain miles of EV range when you're in Mountain mode. The last mode is fairly simple to explain. It's called Hold mode, and that basically keeps your state of charge in your EV battery wherever it is when you press the hold button. And then this vehicle will operate essentially as a gasoline electric hybrid until you turn the hold mode off and then you use your EV power somewhere else. Now because the ELR is a little bit different than pretty much everything else out there on the market, this review is going to be split into 2 kind of different sections when it comes to the drive section. I'm going to talk generally about the ELR and then I'm going to talk about its very narrow set of competitors. If you're coming out of a non-hybrid or non-EV, there are two things you need to keep in mind about the ELR. This vehicle only produces about 200 horsepower, but it produces almost 300 pound-feet of torque, so it is fairly torquey, not a whole lot of horsepower. This vehicle is also fairly heavy. It weighs about 4,000 pounds. Now, that is significantly lighter than a Tesla Model S, but that is significantly heavier than something like a BMW i3. This is also significantly heavier than Cadillac's own ATS Coupe, with which it logically competes. The ELR benefits from all of General Motors' latest front-wheel drive technologies, including an active damping suspension system. We also get the Hyperstrut suspension technology up front that helps the steering feel more precise, although we don't get a whole lot of steering feedback as a result. It also helps limit torque steer. So even though we have 295 pound-feet of torque in this vehicle maximum, we really don't have any noticeable torque steer. Now, the steering in the ELR is very accurate, but it's also very numb. Because this vehicle produces a different amount of total system horsepower when it's operating in EV mode versus when it's operating in range-extending hybrid mode, there is a noticeable difference when it comes to 0 to 60. My tests came out to about half a second or so, although some publications have said it can be up to 1 full second. Now let's get to the numbers. When it comes to acceleration, I give this 7 out of 10 points. I ran from 0 to 60 in 7.4 to 7.8 seconds, depending again on whether the hybrid drivetrain was active or whether it was operating in EV mode only. That higher time is the EV mode only time, the lower number is the hybrid drive time. When you stack that up against the direct competition for this vehicle, obviously it is going to take longer to get to 60 than a Tesla Model S, a BMW i3, or a BMW i8. The BMW i3 is incredibly light thanks to its carbon fiber body structure, and the ELR is all steel. When it comes to braking, I give the ELR 9 out of 10 points. I ran from 60 to 0 in 111 feet, which is very, very short. That's actually shorter than the Tesla Model S. That's because the Tesla Model S is actually heavier than this in most trims. I'm referring generally to the P85, which is the most popular model, and it's probably the one that I would call the closest competitor to this because of its range. This is also shorter than BMW's i3, even though the i3 is lighter, and the reason is all down to the tires. These are very wide tires on the ELR, and the i3 uses very narrow tires. When it comes to cabin noise, my figures rang in at 69.5 decibels at 50 miles an hour. This is relatively quiet, but it's not as quiet as the Tesla or BMW's i8. When it comes to the ride, I give this 9 out of 10 points. We do have a dynamic damping system in this vehicle, and that helps it adjust to varying terrain like the rough terrain that we're on right here. Even in sport mode, which does firm things up, this is never going to be a harsh feeling suspension. Now, on rough roads and corners, when you're really pushing the ELR, the rear suspension can feel slightly unsettled, but that's a very rare occurrence. Overall, I rank the suspension above the Tesla Model S in base form because it does use a standard steel spring setup, but the up-level Tesla does have an optional air suspension system. That air suspension will give you a slightly better ride. However, air suspensions in general can make cars feel a little bit floaty, so you have to decide whether that's right for you or not. When it comes to handling, I give the ELR 9 out of 10 points. This is really a surprisingly good handling vehicle out on these winding mountain roads. It's an awful lot of fun to drive out here. This is actually better handling than BMW's i3 because the i3 again has very narrow tires. This obviously isn't as good as the Model S or as the BMW i8, that goes without saying, but this is a very well balanced vehicle out on the road. It's actually quite fun to drive hard out on these winding mountain roads. The hybrid drivetrain system inside the ELR operates very differently than Ford's Energy or Toyota's plug-in Prius products. And the reason for that is because of the size of this engine. Whereas the Ford and the Toyota products in general have an engine that produces almost as much horsepower as the total vehicle output, this vehicle does not. This vehicle actually has a battery pack that puts out almost as much as the total vehicle's energy output. So whereas when you're driving along the road in a Ford or a Toyota hybrid product, you're primarily drawing power from the engine. And if you floor the vehicle, most of that power is coming from the engine and it supplements it from the battery pack. The Volt is actually a little bit different than that. If you floor this vehicle, of the 217 total system horsepower, most of it is actually going to be coming from the battery pack with the engine augmenting the system. Even though the drivetrains are really quite related in terms of design, the actual programming of the system and the way that it mixes those two power sources is quite different. Now, that power balance is why we have the mountain mode in this hybrid system. In the Ford or the Toyota hybrid systems, when you command full system horsepower, a small portion of that power is coming out of the battery. So it's relatively inconsequential for the engine to deliver that power back to the battery, top it back up, so that way you can use it later. So if you're driving your Toyota or your Ford hybrid hard out on the road, you won't really notice that much difference in terms of the engine speed to try and recover that excess power that you've used back into the battery. So if you've depleted your battery, the engine doesn't really have to rev that much higher than normal to put the power back into the battery. That's different in this hybrid here. In the Cadillac ELR, this engine is only producing 84 horsepower and it's connected to approximately a 74 horsepower generator. But this battery can put out about 177 horsepower. You can really see the numerical imbalance there. Now, recharging that battery back to its ideal ballast level for whatever mode you're in will take a decent amount of time. And as a result, if you're hill climbing, you'll hear this engine spin way up. So right now I've commanded acceleration, the battery was putting out a maximum amount of horsepower, and now the engine has started to catch up. So the engine is now revving way up right now. I can see it in this little display. Can't hear it too well, but I can see it in the display. It's revving up, and now it's charging the battery to compensate for what I just consumed. Now, if you're thinking to yourself that that sounds kind of like the BMW i3, then you're correct. BMW's concept with the i3 and the range extender is that the electric motor can put out approximately 170 horsepower. The battery can supply all of that. Now, if you activate the range extender, that range extender can produce approximately 33 horsepower and stuff that back into the battery. Now, you notice that that problem is even more pronounced than here in the Volt because that imbalance is even greater. Now, I've had a relatively short amount of time to spend in a BMW i3, but some of my viewers own them, and they've told me that once that battery is depleted and you're operating solely on the range extender, it can double or triple your 0 to 60 times and double or triple your passing maneuver times, so keep that in mind with the i3. When it comes to fuel economy, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points. It is somewhat difficult to compare the ELR with other vehicles out there because the Tesla really isn't this same kind of vehicle. Now, in pure EV mode only, the ELR is not a terribly efficient EV. It does score a decent amount lower in terms of its average MPGE than your dedicated EVs out there. So something like a Leaf, a Kia Soul EV, something along those lines, those are going to score higher marks when it comes to their MPGE score. Now, in terms of the luxury competition, the Tesla Model S is actually not that much more efficient than this ELR, and that's all down to the weight of the Tesla Model S. Now, BMW's i8 and i3 score excellent efficiency numbers, primarily due to their very expensive carbon fiber chassis. Over the first 285 miles in the ELR where I was able to plug it in nightly, I averaged 65.9 miles per gallon overall. Now, over the last 189 miles where I haven't been plugging this vehicle in and I've been operating gasoline only, I've been averaging 32.7 miles per gallon. When you're comparing this to other luxury hybrids out there on the market, this is relatively similar to Lexus's GS hybrid, and this is a little bit lower than Lincoln's MKZ hybrid. Pricing for the ELR starts out at $75,000. Now, keep in mind there is a $7,500 federal tax rebate. There's also a California tax rebate if you're in the state of California, and various other states have additional tax incentives for buying one. Now, you do want to check with a tax professional to make sure that that applies to your tax situation before you sign on the dotted line. The options are relatively simple in the ELR. For $2,450, you can get the upgraded leather that our model has right in here. You can also get the $1,695 package that includes the auto-dimming high beams, blind zone, and cross-traffic monitoring. Our particular vehicle has that as well. That brings our tester to $79,145 as tested. Again, that is before any applicable tax incentives. Now, you can also add a $1,995 radar adaptive cruise control package, and that will top this vehicle out at $81,137. When it comes to comparisons, the Cadillac ELR is difficult to categorize, and it's also difficult to compare it with other vehicles, because this is truly the only current vehicle out there on the market that offers you the ability to operate as a pure EV without too many compromises and as a hybrid electric vehicle without too many compromises. Now, there's no similar luxury vehicle like this in the Lexus stable. The closest you could probably get would be a Lexus GS 450h. But the Lexus GS 450 is not available as a plug-in vehicle. It's just a hybrid vehicle, so I really can't call that direct competition to the ELR. It's also a 4-door, not a 2-door. That leaves us with just a few vehicles. We have the BMW i3 at $55,350, more or less comparably equipped to the ELR. We then have the Tesla Model S at $94,570, but as a pure EV, I wouldn't exactly call that direct competition either. The only reason I'm including it here is because you asked me to over on my Facebook page. In fact, the only 2-door luxury EV/parallel hybrid/serial hybrid out there is the $140,000 BMW i8. Now, BMW's i3 is EPA rated for 80 miles on a battery charge. That's about twice what you'll get out of the ELR. However, in its range extending mode, it will only go about 160 miles before you fill its gas tank. That is about half of what you can get in the ELR with a full battery and a full gas tank. The other thing you need to know about that i3 is that it only produces 33 horsepower in its range extending mode. Now, the Tesla Model S is a little bit tricky because honestly, Tesla has kind of a cult-like following. It is definitely a high-style brand, and it's a little bit above the Cadillac in terms of brand positions. That's obviously something to keep in mind, and that's why you'd be willing to pay $94,000 for a pure EV that cannot fill up with gas like you can in the ELR. Of course, the ability to fill the ELR with gasoline and drive it like a normal vehicle, in fact with a little bit more horsepower than when it's operating in EV-only mode, is part of why this is so expensive compared to some of those other entries out there, because there's more going on under the hood. We also have the weight to consider, because this vehicle may weigh over 4,000 pounds, but the Tesla is significantly heavier because it has an awful lot more battery going on in the vehicle. You can also thank these wide 245 with tires all the way around. They're fairly grippy, and it gives the ELR very confident handling. This does not handle like a Chevy Volt. It does not handle like a Toyota Prius. Now, meanwhile, the Tesla has a solid rear-wheel drive driving dynamic, but in terms of absolute road holding, it's not really that much better than the Cadillac ELR because of the weight. Now, there's no doubt the Tesla is faster. The Tesla, even in base form, will go 0 to 60 in about half the time it will take the Cadillac ELR to accomplish that same task. However, if you're driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles or San Francisco to San Diego, it will take you several hours less in the Cadillac ELR than in that Tesla Model S, because the Model S only has a 265-mile EPA range. Now, depending on how you drive the Tesla, you may be able to get a little bit more out of it, but going from San Francisco to Los Angeles is about 400 miles, and that is just beyond the range of a Model S in normal form. So you will have to do some supplementary charging on your way. Even with a supercharging station at legal speeds, you're going to end up there an awful lot faster in the ELR. It's going to be more convenient as well. That's definitely what you're paying for in the ELR. You're paying for that convenience. It's not as comfortable on the inside as the Tesla, especially in terms of rear seat accommodations. It's not as large as the Tesla. You can't fit as much cargo in it as you can in the Tesla, but you can go any place in this and fill it with gasoline and just drive it like a normal car if you want to. Now, BMW's i8 is a very different vehicle. It's $140,000. That means it's nearly twice as expensive as this vehicle, and depending on how you configure your i8, you can easily make it twice as expensive as the car that we're taking a look at right here. Now, as you'd expect in a vehicle that's that expensive, we have more luxury gadgets, goodies, gizmos going on the inside. We have a significantly more powerful drivetrain. We have slightly longer EV range in that vehicle as well. We have those really cool gull-wing doors in addition. Now, the i8 is more comfortable, it's faster 0 to 60, and it likely will be handling better than this ELR. However, you are definitely going to pay for that extra comfort, that extra badge, and the extra performance in that BMW. Now, the i3 is a little bit tricky. It's obviously more practical than the ELR. It's more of a boxy kind of people mover, so you can fit people in the back seat far more easily than you can in the ELR. You can't necessarily fit that much more cargo in that i3 because we don't have a whole lot of room between the rear seats and the tailgate in that model. Now, overall, in terms of value, I'm going to have to give the ELR 5 out of 10 points because there's a whole lot going on in this vehicle, and it just helps drop the value score. This is an EV, it's a hybrid, it's also kind of a regular gasoline car all lumped into one vehicle. And as such, you're paying for all those separate systems, and that's why the sticker price is so large in the ELR. Still, this is one of my favorite plug-in vehicles because there aren't that many plug-in vehicles out there, and this one truly drives like an EV when it's in plug-in mode, and it truly drives like a hybrid when it's in hybrid mode. There are few compromises in terms of driving. However, that does bring me along to the Cadillac ATS, and that Cadillac ATS I think is the biggest problem for this Cadillac ELR. The ATS is significantly less expensive, it's significantly more practical than the ELR, it seats 5 in a little bit more comfort right there in the back seat. It also has a slightly more modern Cadillac grille going on right up front, we have a little bit more horsepower, it's rear-wheel drive, but most importantly, it's tens of thousands of dollars less than this Cadillac ELR, and it will take you a small eternity to make up that difference when it comes to the gas pump and your gas bill. My bottom line with the ELR is that it really depends on what kind of a shopper you are. If you're willing to pay extra for that green technology, then this may be a good buy for you. Now, the ELR has an excellent interior, and I really like the exterior styling of this vehicle. Cadillac does also tell me that there are additional incentives out there, combined with the federal and state incentives, can reduce the purchase price of the ELR by more than $20,000, depending on the area you live in and your tax situation. That will bring the price down on the ELR to around $55,000 or so, which will make it directly competitive with something like a BMW i3, but it really again depends on where you live and what your tax situation is, as well as what incentives GM is running at the moment that you're buying. Now, that said, I would probably skip the ELR and I would buy the Cadillac ATS 2.0T Coupe instead. It easily outhandles the Mercedes Coupe, and it's very, very close with the BMW. I would actually give the nod to the Cadillac ATS when it comes to driving dynamics. Thanks for taking the time to check out this channel. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the Cadillac ELR. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, over at Twitter as AlexNautos, and you can email your questions to alex@alexnautos.com. I'll see you next week.